Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, office horror stories. Now, offices might seem like the least likely place for horror. I mean, there's bright lights, busy coworkers, and endless emails. But what happens when the strange, the eerie, and the downright terrifying creep into the workplace? Tonight, we're diving into chilling true stories from office settings, where unexplained footsteps echo down empty hallways, shadows move where no one should be, and harmless coworkers harbor unsettling secrets. Buckle up, because after this, you'll never look at your 9 to 5 the same way again. Let's begin. I still can't believe I'm typing this out to you, but here it goes. I'm keeping names and locations out of this because of an active NDA, but I work in an office building where, every summer, we get a big influx of new hires. And it's just the nature of the place. Students out of school, people looking for a fresh start. It's usually a mix of personalities, some more memorable than others. But this one dude from a couple of years ago, I'll never forget him. He showed up on his first day looking like he had no idea that this was an office job. Big guy, probably around mid-30s to early 40s, with a sleeve of tattoos and a Confederate flag bandana tied around his head. Right off the bat, you could tell he had a chip on his shoulder. He did not say much to anyone at first, just kind of scowled and looked like he was sizing up the place. About an hour in, he starts mouthing off, loudly. At first I did not catch everything, but he was clearly talking trash about one of our supervisors. Lazy, doesn't do anything, that sort of thing. I guess the guy did not realize who he was talking about, because our supervisor, let's call him Mike, was standing about 5 feet away, trying really hard to ignore it. Mike's a pretty chill guy, and he's got a reputation for not losing his cool. But after about 10 minutes, he couldn't take it anymore. "This is your first day," Mike said, calm but firm. "Do you really want to get a bad rep with your supervisor?" Most people would back off at that point, right? Not this guy. He doubled down, yelling about how Mike wasn't even fit to supervise. People in the office started whispering to each other, and I could feel the tension building. I was trying to keep my head down, but I couldn't help but watching it unfold. Mike tried to de-escalate. He told the guy to go home and come back tomorrow with a better attitude. But the guy wasn't having it. He got up right in Mike's face, chest puffed out, clearly trying to intimidate him. Then, out of nowhere, he shoved Mike hard enough to make him stumble back a step. That was it. Mike snapped. He swung at the guy, a clean, no hesitation punch aimed right for his jaw. But before Mike could connect, the guy reached behind him, pulled a gun out of his waistband, and shot Mike in the stomach. It did not even feel real at first. The sound was deafening, and for a split second, everyone froze. Then all hell broke loose. People were screaming, desks were being knocked over, and everyone was scrambling to get out. I did not even think. I just dove for the nearest window, yanked it open, and climbed out. I did not care that it was a 10-foot drop to the ground. I landed hard, twisted my ankle, but kept running. From what I heard later, the guy just stood there after he fired the shot, like he was in some kind of daze. He did not try to run or do anything else. When the cops showed up, they surrounded the building and walked him out in cuffs without any resistance. It was like he couldn't process what had just happened. Mike survived, thank God, but it was a long road to recovery. The bullet messed up his spine, and he had to relearn how to walk. He eventually came back to work, though, which says a lot about his character. As for the shooter, he's obviously in prison now. I don't know much about the trial since the company kept everything pretty locked down, but from what I understand, he did not even try to fight the charges. It's wild to think that something like this could happen in an office setting. You think of your workplace as a safe, boring environment, but it just goes to show that you never really know what kind of people you're dealing with. I've thought about that day a lot, and honestly, I'm just glad I got out of there in one piece. I was working alone in my office at 3 a.m., and I still can't explain what happened that night. This happened about 3 years ago, when I was working in an advertising agency. At the time, I was a junior copywriter, and the deadlines were brutal. Staying late wasn't unusual, but this particular night, I had pushed it way too far. It was nearly 3 a.m. As far as I could tell, I was the only one in the office. The layout of my department was pretty straightforward. Imagine a long, wide hallway with tall cupboard-like desks lining both sides. On the left, there were 4 desks for the senior staff, and on the right were 8 cubicle-style desks for the juniors like me. This arrangement repeated 4 times down the hallway, creating a sort of segmented workspace for different teams. Each segment belonged to a different client, so the desks were customized. Props, samples, branding materials, you name it. My desk was in the 3rd section, right along the aisle. When I sat down, I couldn't see directly in front of me because of the tall cupboards, but if I leaned to the side, I had a clear view down the entire length of the hallway to the 1st section. The 1st section was for a milk brand, and their desks were unmistakable. The tops of their cupboards were always stocked with milk cartons, various designs, mock-ups, and promotional samples. It was a bit of a running joke in the office how over the top it was. That night, the entire office was dark except for my section. My desk light and ceiling fan were on, creating a small bubble of light and sound in the oppressive silence. I was firing off emails, trying to wrap up before calling it a night. But the later it got, the more uneasy I felt. The building itself did not help. Everyone knew it was built on what used to be a graveyard. My coworkers had plenty of ghost stories to share, and sitting there at 3 a.m., every single one of them decided to replay in my head. Then I heard it, a clattering noise, sharp and sudden, like something falling. My fingers froze on the keyboard. It came from the 1st section, the one with the milk cartons. Slowly, I leaned to the side to peer down the hallway. All the milk cartons on the 1st section's cupboards had toppled over. Not a few of them. All of them. The cartons were scattered across the floor like someone had swiped their arm across the surface to knock them down. My first thought was that it had to be the ceiling fan. Maybe the air circulation had caused it. But when I looked up, my ceiling fan was still on, and the fan in that section was off. There was no airflow between the sections anyway. The gap was too large for the weak office fans to have any effect. I stared down the hallway, hoping, praying, that I see something that made sense. Maybe one of the cartons had been balanced poorly, and the rest had toppled in a chain reaction. But the way they were arranged before, that did not seem possible. The silence after the crash was deafening. My chest tightened as I realized I couldn't hear anything except the faint hum of my fan and my own breathing. No voices, no movement, nothing. I tried to tell myself it was just gravity or some freak coincidence, but my gut told me to leave. I slammed my laptop shut and shoved it into my bag without even bothering to organize my things. As I zipped my bag, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, like someone was watching me. I did not dare look down that hallway again. I walked as fast as I could without outright running, my footsteps echoing in the empty office. When I reached the elevator, I hit the button repeatedly, glancing back over my shoulder every few seconds. The milk cartons were out of sight by then, but the dark hallway seemed to stretch on forever. The elevator doors finally opened, and I stepped in, slamming the closed door button before the doors had even fully opened. As the elevator descended, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just narrowly avoided something. What it was, I don't know, and I don't want to know. The next day, I mentioned the incident to a coworker. She laughed it off, saying it was probably just the air conditioning. But when I asked if the milk cartons had been cleaned up when she arrived that morning, she gave me a blank stare. Apparently, when she came in, everything in the 1st section was perfectly in place. I never stayed past midnight again. This happened about 6 months ago, and I still can't fully explain it. I've gone over it in my head countless times, trying to rationalize what I saw and felt, but it keeps coming up empty. I'm putting it here to see if anyone else has experienced something similar. It started on an ordinary Thursday night. My friend, David, invited me and another buddy, Sean, to grab supper at this small diner near his office. After eating, David mentioned he needed to swing by his workplace to pick up his backpack. Sean and I tagged along since his office was just a short walk away. David worked in an old building, probably built in the 70s, judging by the dingy tiles and flickering fluorescent lights in the hallways. It had this weird, musty smell, like wet cardboard and stale air, which made the place feel even more depressing. We took the creaky elevator to the 14th floor, where David's office was. Sean decided to wait outside the lift lobby, while I followed David to the reception area. David unlocked the door and flipped on a small inner light before heading deeper into the darkened office to retrieve his bag. I stayed in the reception area, sitting on this worn-out couch, pushed up against the wall. There was a pillar a few feet in front of me, and I could see the dim reflections of the other offices through the tall windows. It was quiet, just the low hum of the air conditioning and the occasional clunk of pipes in the walls. And I was zoning out, staring at the faint city lights outside, when something caught my eye. A shadow. It moved across the pillar in front of me, like someone walking past. I froze, my brain scrambling to make sense of it. The shadow was clear, unmistakable, a human silhouette. The problem was, nothing had passed by me. The reception area was empty except for me, and David was still somewhere inside the office. I sat there for a moment, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a trick of the light from the windows, I thought. But before I could dwell on it further, David came back with his backpack slung over one shoulder. "You didn't see anyone else in there, did you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. David gave me this puzzled look. "No, it's just us. Everyone leaves by 6. Why?" I hesitated, then decided not to say too much. "Never mind, let's go." We stepped out into the lift lobby where Sean was waiting, scrolling through his phone. And as we approached the elevators, I noticed something on the screen above the doors. The lifts were moving. Without anyone pressing a button, they'd started coming up from the ground floor. The three of us exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't one of those fancy new buildings with motion sensors that could detect people nearby. These were old, clunky elevators that barely worked half the time. We stood there in silence, watching the numbers climb. 10, 11, 12, 13. Finally, the lift stopped on our floor, and the door slid open with a dull ding. Did anyone press that?" Sean asked. None of us had touched the call button. I felt a cold sweat creeping down my back. David, trying to play it cool, stepped inside and motioned for us to follow. "Let's just go," he said quickly. We crammed into the elevator, and David jabbed the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, I kept expecting someone, or something, to appear, but nothing did. The ride down was slow and rattly, every shudder of the lift making my heart race. When we finally reached the lobby, we practically bolted out of the building without a word. A few months later, I found that the lift in that building had crashed. There were people inside it when it happened, but miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. The building was demolished not long after, and part of me was relieved to know that it was gone. Still, I can't shake that feeling that whatever I saw, or thought I saw, had something to do with it. I don't know what to make of it. A shadow where there shouldn't have been one. Lifts moving on their own. Maybe it was all just a coincidence, but I haven't gone back to that area since, and I don't think I ever will. Hey, what's up guys? It's Spooky. If you've made it this far, congratulations, you survived. If you did not know, I have an Instagram,
follow me on there so we can connect. I also have a Patreon. On there, you'll have direct access to me and can see the upcoming videos, polls, and soon-to-be exclusive stories only shared on there. If that's something that interests you, please consider joining. That's all I have for you guys tonight. Stay spooky, and I'll see you in the next video.